The Acolyte is just round the corner, and I'm pretty sure we're all quite excited for it. And I was just looking through the various teasers and trailers they've released so far, and I noticed something that not many people are talking about, and it has everything to do with this one little scene from one of the recent teasers. What we see here appears to be Master Sol dueling with Kalnacca, the Wookiee Jedi, which really raises a whole lot of questions like what does it mean, when does it happen, and when you view this one scene in isolation, it's pretty hard to tell. But when we start to string things together, some separate scenes across several trailers and teasers, we can actually have some idea of what's truly going on. And it has everything to do with the night Mel was adopted into the Jedi Order. Now, in an earlier breakdown video, I mentioned that based on the scenes of Mel's first encounter with the Jedi, something clearly goes wrong, and if you pay attention to the background of Sol and Kalnacca's duel, you can actually see that this fight is situated in that same time frame. Considering that Sol's shorter haircut matches his haircut of that same time period, and Kalnacca's presence on that night is established in another scene, we can definitely say that this showdown happens then as well. So this isn't some random sparring session that the two are engaged in. Another scene that also depicts Jedi fighting Jedi is Kalnacca trying to kill this unnamed Jedi on the same night, and we can even see him trying to crush the unnamed Jedi's head with his hand. So this, again, isn't some light sparring session for sure. To figure out what exactly is going on here, I kinda stitched together the relevant scenes in what I thought to be the right order, and this is what I got.
To pull the through.
She was my student. I trained her.
Of a larger plan. Change everything.
So my best guess as to what happens this night is that Sol and Dara Kalnacca and the unnamed Jedi meet the Coven of Witches to collect Mel and recruit her into the Jedi Order. But this is met with some resistance and some dark side scheming. Now we do get a scene of the witches performing some sort of ritual, and we already know that this Coven of Witches does have some dark side affiliation, which leads me to conclude that whatever ritual they're doing here likely resulted in the unnamed Jedi's eyes turning black and collapsing, almost as if he was about to be possessed by something dark. Now this possession could be the witch's way of fighting back against the Jedi, possessing him and forcing the Jedi to fight one another, which would explain why we get some Jedi on Jedi action. And there are a lot of hints that this is in fact a sort of trance or possession, as in another scene we do see what looks to be members of the Coven with similar black eyes swaying left and right. So I'm pretty certain that this is some sort of manifestation of the dark side, and that the Coven of Witches are most certainly channeling the dark side of the Force. However, this doesn't really explain why Sol is also fighting Kalnacca. After all, if the possessed Jedi is the unnamed one, it's kinda weird that Sol is fighting Kalnacca here. Not to mention the way Kalnacca is aggressively pursuing the unnamed Jedi seems rather un-Jedi-like. So what I think is happening here is that as the Jedi witness these dark side users perform their rituals, Kalnacca might decide that given how strong the dark side is here, he must destroy it, which would explain why he's so hell-bent on killing the unnamed Jedi and why Sol might not be so keen to agree. And so what could be the case is that the two disagree on how they should deal with the Coven of Witches and the possessed Jedi, resulting in a battle. The ensuing battle results in a traumatic experience for Mel, all of which leads up to the preceding events of the show. It's an entirely possible scenario that would lead into the themes of power that was hinted at in the trailer. Again, we know that the show is going to be told from the villain's perspective, so it would be safe to assume that Kalnacca's decision to eradicate anything he deems to be the dark side of the Force is an illustration of that theme. And from the villain's perspective, this is the precise impetus required to walk down the path of power in order to change things from the way it is, that being the dominance of the Jedi. I think this would certainly explain why we see Kalnacca fighting the unnamed Jedi and Sol and play into the potential theme of the show. It would also provide us with an interesting perspective, potentially a more tyrannical perspective of the Jedi as they squash out opposition to their order and dark side interpretations of the Force that defer to their own. A second possibility is that much like the unnamed Jedi who was possessed by the witch's dark ritual, Kalnacca also becomes possessed after Sol and the other Jedi manage to subdue the unnamed Jedi. It's an entirely possible scenario that the witch's ritual takes advantage of the weaknesses within Jedi that can lead them down the dark side. So in the case of the nameless Jedi, it may have taken advantage of the fear within him, while in the case of Kalnacca, it may have exacerbated the rage within him, a rage which Wookiees are known to possess within them. So perhaps the scene where we see Sol fighting Kalnacca is simply just an extension of the dark side working its way through the Jedi. Another point to note is that whether or not Kalnacca even survives this particular situation. And it's a little difficult to determine considering that the only other scene of Kalnacca that we get is the Wookiee in the woods, which doesn't really give us an indication of when or where this takes place. But if we consider this scene in the woods and we look at the trees behind him, we can at least deduce that these trees are not quite the same as the ones when the Jedi finally encountered the dark side user shown in the trailer. Instead, the silhouette of these trees do kinda match the scene in which we see Mel running through a burning forest. So what this could indicate is that the other scene of Kalnacca takes place just before the duel between the Jedi. If this is indeed the case, then you can expect Kalnacca to likely die following his duel with Sol, which could support the idea that he was in fact possessed by the dark side, forcing Sol to kill his fellow Jedi as a last resort. However, none of these theories really explain why there might be an explosion that ends up killing the vast majority of the witches. And this is actually something that we can see in the background in one scene depicting Sol observing the aftermath of the explosion. And I think what will eventually become clear is that this incident between the Jedi and the witches has been orchestrated by a Sith Lord working behind the scenes. There are just far too many moving parts within this one scene for it to simply be a misunderstanding or tragedy. So what could be the case is that this incident was orchestrated by the Sith Lord in question as a way to ferment greater distrust and hatred towards the Jedi, potentially recruiting other Force-sensitive individuals like Mel to their cause. I would go as far as to say that this incident might be an inflection point for the Jedi, as we do know that during the time of the High Republic, it was also a time of Jedi expansion. And so this incident could kick off a chain reaction that makes the galaxy a whole lot hostile towards the Jedi. Another interesting question to consider is why would the Jedi send out 4 Jedi to recruit one potential youngling? In most cases, it would only require one Jedi to collect a Force-sensitive individual. So what this might allude to is the fact that not only is the Coven an anti-Jedi organization, but Mel might very well be a very powerful Force-sensitive, one that the Jedi might have felt was too powerful to be left in the hands of a dark side organization, hence the need to force the Coven to give her up. It certainly is an interesting point to consider. Regardless of which possibility might be true, it's going to be very interesting as I'm pretty certain that this scene will take place in the first few episodes of the show, setting the tone for the rest of the season. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I'm the Acolyte,
and I have spoken.